just something that I noticed. So the market for game one, right, was a little all over the place. It was like 5.5, 6. The Celtics are 6.5 point favorites in game one. It's in the Timberwolves series. We saw this 3 different times where like Dallas on the road, more than a possession dog, and it was like dead wrong all 3 times. I mean, it was like not even close. And part in game five, this wasn't true, but in game one and game two, it was like, right, but if you get them in a one possession game with like 6 minutes to go, like Boston can't cover this. Like it's almost not possible because of the efficiency that Dallas will have on the like Boston has to like try to do what Minnesota did, which is create enough distance that you don't get into one of these like end games with Kyrie and Luka especially, where like every Mavs possession might be like a really, really quality shot when the game slows down. Like it's got a little bit of the Minnesota games in it where you just look and go, I mean, I think Boston's going to win the series. Like that's what I think. I don't know how I'm going to bet it yet, but I do think they're going to win the NBA Finals, and they're favored. That's not like that contrarian of an opinion, but I do look at like these kinds of spread numbers for the games, Jeremy, and it's just like, man, but they're just going to truck them, really? And then if it's a close game, now I'm still saying I like Boston, but really if it's a close game, I like Boston. Like it messes with your head a little bit when the team that was so historically good in the regular season doesn't seem like the team you'd want in a close game and doesn't seem like the team that has the best player. They definitely don't. It's one of the things that makes the series so interesting.
I'm just wondering if I should dive back into how they've done since the trade deadline and looking at some of their numbers and take out the games where Luka and Kyrie are sitting and just look at that and kind of go,
okay, look at the playoff games.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that as well, but if I'm looking at the playoff games, it's going to make me want to bet the Mavs even more than the Celtics just because they've had
quality of competition.
Letdowns that and letdowns in game two with as you're a double-digit favorite and you lose outright at home. I think all that's weird when you start to break it down. But I don't listen to a lot of NBA players podcast, but you always see clips on social media all the time. And I was listening to Kevin Garnett talk about Luka and Shaq talk about Luka, and they were mentioning just how well he controls a game. Like he's just got the grip on the game. And this feels like one of those series where it should be. I hate making a blank. It should be like an under series that we see a slower game, more half court sets, I believe. But we've seen these two teams go at it and just run up and down the court and shoot. So, I mean, I'm spinning my wheels here, not saying much, but it's a really it's a series where I feel like I'm torn because of my fandom.
Sure,
I'm picking a
that
side.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I wish you do more on this in the next segment. Like I did a lot on the finals on Tuesday before you and I hosted together, so I can reiterate some of that. But I think what you're speaking to is just like, do you want the best team or do you want the best player? And I think that confuses a lot of people who might want a little bit of both.
With these finals, though, one of the things that I go back to with you were kind of stacking the superstars. Where do you put Kyrie if you were stacking? Like Luka's one, is Tatum two, or is Kyrie in there? Is he under Tatum and Brown? What do you think when you look at Kyrie right now?
I mean, I think it's definitely a fun. It's going to turn into a first take episode pretty soon. I think it's a fun conversation only because, I think there are certain players who get more respect in like a postseason situation, either because they're veteran players or because we remember them for signature moments, or we've seen them play at a really high level. Maybe it's a ceiling kind of a conversation where, like maybe Kyrie Irving has a ceiling that is, I mean, pretty untouchable by a lot of current NBA players, even though, like, if you're going to do this kind of like the old-fashioned way, I don't even know what that means, using like regular season accomplishments, you'd be like, cool, like I actually don't, did Jaylen Brown make third team All-NBA this year? I don't know if he did. Jason Tatum was a first team All-NBA player. Jaylen Brown, I think, has made All-NBA before because that's how he got his insane contract.
The max.
But whatever, $200 million, whatever it was. But so just like if I'm ranking it that way, then it's clearly like Tatum and then Brown and then Kyrie. But there's just this kind of like mystical quality to Kyrie, and I don't mean that to mean like the sage on the court stuff. More just there's a ceiling there that's a little more interesting than with a lot of players that have that metric profile or that points per game and offensive efficiency, because your eye test tells you that he's just like so much more than that. So I mean, I'm putting him fourth, but like with the idea that in any single game he can still have a huge game.
See, it's weird, like in the context of like the now, I get all that. Like, I think in the history of the sport, we still haven't got to see like what Tatum's going to be over the long haul. He's got a lot of time left. Brown, but taking outside of anything off the court, just on the court, Kyrie Irving, to me, is one of the most beautiful basketball players. It's poetry in motion to me watching him play. And the ball's on a string, seeing some of the moves that he can do and how he, like, I just think he can take anybody off the dribble. Like, he was licking his chops when he heard Ant Edwards was going to guard him, and Ant's a good defender. So he's so different because I believe he is matchup proof. Like, they're going to throw two good defenders at Luka and Kyrie. I think both of them are matchup proof, but yeah, I'd rather have defenders like this in a series than, some of the guys we saw trying to guard both of those guys. What about the revenge stuff? I love the side stories. If KP ends up healthy going back to Dallas, but the one I love even more is Kyrie going back to Boston. The guy that's selling the Kyrie suck shirts out front of the Garden is going to be making a ton of money. What are your thoughts on Kyrie going back and maybe a little bit on KP going back?
I mean, can Kyrie have revenge narratives, right? Like, didn't he voluntarily leave?
Yes.
It's not like the Celtics told him, we don't think you're good enough.
Yeah.
So I don't get it. It's a fun narrative. I think if anybody should feel like this is a spot to stick it to their former employer, it's Porzingis, right? He was legitimately just shipped out of Dallas for a bag of peanuts, right? They traded him basically straight up for Davis Bertans and Spencer Dinwiddie. So I think he should be the one who has the motivational edge if we're going to give it to anybody. But no, it's always fun to have some narratives to look at. And Kyrie Irving's certainly a great player. I really have enjoyed this sort of veteran role that he has stepped into this postseason. And we'll see if he can put together a big series in Boston.
Matt, I'm curious, just finals MVP. Maybe we'll get, we can do series prediction. We can do game one. There's still other angles here, but, you're bringing up Kyrie as a star player. We were talking about Luka already and whether he's actually somehow like overrated now just because every single person is like, he's the best player. I just don't know if that's true. Like, can't he just be the third best player? Isn't that okay? Like, he has to be the best player till he wins a title. In terms of finals MVP, it seems like, and the betting market definitely says this, all right, Dallas wins. I mean, Kyrie's a great player, but like Dallas wins, Luka's probably going to win finals MVP, and the market reflects that. So kind of two-part question. One, do you agree with that? And then two, on the Boston side, we saw Jaylen Brown win Eastern Conference Finals MVP, but he won it by one vote in a sweep in a kind of a weird series. So Tatum still almost won. Do you think that there's the possibility of a non-Tatum player winning for the Celtics? So kind of how do you assess and handicap Finals MVP for both Dallas and Boston?
Yeah, I feel like the Luka part of that is spot on. I feel the same way about Luka as I do with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, right? Like, if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes is going to be the MVP. And I know you can try to get cute. You can talk yourself into different players being values at, big numbers, but we're talking just such a small range of outcomes where Dallas actually wins this series, and it's not because Luka Doncic was the best player on the floor. So I think for the most part, that's the only bet I'm making on the Mavericks side if I'm betting the Mavericks. And I think Jaylen Brown is very live to win this award. I think he's been their best player, the Celtics' best player throughout the postseason. So I would much rather take him at 6-1 than I would lay -125 with Tatum.